So recently I watched the film Apollo 18. Now, it's a film that really piqued my interest as soon as I saw the trailer, as soon as I heard about it. I was kind of like really wanting to see it. It sounded really intriguing. It's directed by Gonzalo Lopez Gallego, who's a relative newcomer, and the film revolves around the idea that there was an 18th mission to the moon. Now, I'm sure as we all know, there were 17 missions, Apollo missions, and uh, after Apollo 17, the Apollo program was shut down. So the idea of the film is that what happened after that is there was a covert operation where they sent another three astronauts up in a capsule to the moon, and they called that Apollo 18. Funnily enough, some of these rumors are actual rumors that there have been a bunch of rumors that there were subsequent missions to the moon and things like that. I don't really know how much water that holds, but there you have it. So I wonder if the writers um, were inspired by it or anything like that. So the film, like I say, it starts off. You have the three astronauts played by Warren Christie, Ryan Robbins, and Lloyd Owen. I have a thing down here that I've written and I can't read it because I don't have my contacts in. Very clever, Michael. The three astronauts, they go up, and the build up of the film is actually surprisingly really good. Now, this is where the main conceit of the film comes in. The main conceit is that the film is actually a found footage film, so much like the Blair Witch Project, Cloverfield, Wreck, Cannibal Holocaust, that sort of thing. This is a film where the whole idea is that what you're seeing is sort of handheld footage that was recorded by the people and their experiences, and they were probably never found, and you're watching the secret footage, so it's like you're in on it, right? So I like that idea. I think the unfortunate thing with documentary horror films is that they've very rarely been done well. I think Wreck was fantastic. I think some of the other ones I mentioned were good as well, but it's very rare that it really like, holds up as a concept over like an hour and a half. So in this film in Apollo 18, it's the astronauts have a bunch of cameras on them. They have like the Apollo astronauts used to have when they were in their uh, in their spacesuits. They actually had like a camera attached to them, and you've seen all the footage. They would set cameras up and beam it back to Earth and all that sort of stuff. So in Apollo 18, that's the main idea. There are also cameras set up within the capsules. The film starts off with like interviews that are being recorded with the astronauts, and right away it establishes this is a secret. These guys are pretty gutted that they can't actually tell their families. They can't tell anyone that this is what they're doing. They've had to swear secrecy. They've actually had to tell everybody they're going off on like training missions and things like that. Rather than telling them that they're actually going to go to the moon, which you can imagine you'd be gutted if you're going to the moon you couldn't tell anyone. So what happens is the film builds up after that. They launch into orbit of Earth, and then they go on their way to the moon. And the film really nicely builds up this sort of claustrophobic tension. The performances of the three actors are very strong, very good, and the three of them, blend well together. They play off of each other well, and it would be very easy, I think, to get the performances wrong in this type of film. I think you have to be a fairly strong actor to make something work where large parts of it are in a contained space, but they all do really admirably well. And the film builds up. Now, again, if you don't know how the Apollo missions worked, what happens is they get to the moon, and the spacecraft that they're in splits in two. There's an orbiter that orbits the moon, and then there's a lander which lands on the moon. Now, two of the astronauts go in the lander, one astronaut stays in the orbiter, and then once they've done their mission on the moon, they then blast off and redock with the orbiter, and the three astronauts together go home. So that's the plan. And the covert mission that they've been given is never really made entirely clear as far as the astronauts are concerned. They have to sort of put out these pieces of technology that are going to be some sort of like listening device for like Soviet missions, and so they can, it's a spying aid basically. So everything's going fine. They've built up the tension very nicely, and then once they get there, once the two astronauts get there on the moon, most of the action of the film takes place, and we have like long walks and expeditions out to different parts of the moon as they're placing these listening devices. The problem is they realise that they're not alone, and someone's already there. So that's where I'm going to stop with regards to the plot. That's the whole idea of it. All right. Now, it's I think it's very well done actually. I really felt that the production values, the film cost like $5 million to make. Now that's nothing for a film, and what they actually achieved, I think, was really well done. I think they really captured. If you've watched any of the old footage from like the old NASA space flights, I think they really captured the feel of that. They got like interiors of the spacecraft, and the scenes on the moon looked excellent. It was easier maybe for them to accomplish that because they obviously, because it's supposed to be like retro cameras, the footage isn't supposed to be tip top, and that's where we come into one of the first problems of the film. I don't know how believable it is that they've got all of these different cameras set up. Certainly the missions to the moon did did have a lot of cameras, but in some ways it almost feels as if the technology is maybe a little bit too advanced for the time and actually capturing what's going on in the film. So that's a minor quibble. Um, Another big problem with the film is that the build-up's very good, but there's a moment in the film, maybe about half an hour in, 40 minutes in, where it starts to drag. It starts to drag. It feels like, okay, you've established the characters now, let's get on with the film, and it feels as if a little bit of it is maybe a little bit of filler to like bring the film up to feature length. Also, a big problem is that the payoff with regards to what's going on in the moon, and I'm not going to ruin it, but what I will say is to me it was really uninspired. The just the presentation of what that was just wasn't very good to my mind. It didn't capture my imagination in any way, shape, or form. But what I will say is that the emotional payoff at the end is very good. And you start to get a real sense of excitement and kind of on the edge of your seat, sort of, are these guys going to survive, that sort of thing. And they also have a really nice little twist, well, not twist, a little reveal at the end, which ties into something very real that did actually happen on Earth. And that's kind of nice as well. It adds to the sort of mythos of the film. The problem with Apollo 18, though, is that it just isn't great. That's the main problem with it. I think we've seen a lot of this before. In many ways, it reminded me of there's a B movie from like the early 1990s called Dark Side of the Moon. I'll do a video on it at some point. It's one that not a lot of people have actually seen, but I'm a big fan of it, right? I mean, it's rubbish in places, but it's a B movie, so you kind of accept it for that. But I think there's some really great things in it, and there were aspects of that film which I felt were paralleled in Apollo 18. Just the vibe, the atmosphere, the feeling of the film, and like I say, it didn't work over like however long it is, an hour and a half or whatever. It really, in a lot of ways, it felt like this should be a Twilight Zone episode, or actually, more specifically, probably an Outer Limits episode. You know, make it 40, 50 minutes long, and you've got a really great story that would have worked very, really, really well. But the actors sell it. It's been getting absolutely lambasted by critics. It's been getting torn to shreds by critics, and that's one of the reasons I'm making this video, because I think it's really unfair. I think the filmmakers have tried to do something which was, ambitious, which really stands out in terms of documentary horror. There's so many documentary horror films which are so similar, you know. You get a lot of ones that copied Cannibal Holocaust. You get a lot of ones that copied Blair Witch, um, and I think that Apollo 18 really tries to do something which is different. You know, it stands out, and it might sound a bit lame. It stands out because it's on the moon, but the whole setup of these guys out there, it captures well the isolation that the Apollo astronauts must have been feeling, and probably the exact same feeling that astronauts going around the Earth feel as well in the International Space Station. However, especially what's going on right now with the fact that they can't actually get them down because they don't have any. Well, they can get them down, but they don't have any regular flights going to the ISS at the moment. Anyway, that's a different story. um, I think that it's definitely worth a watch. Apollo 18. I thought it was exciting in places. I enjoyed it. Reminded me of some other films that I'd seen. Reminded me kind of Mission to Mars. You know, that sort of thing. But yeah, still good, decent. That's all it is. It's just decent. There's some very good things in it, and there's probably some things in it that are a bit lame. You know, one of the problems that documentary horror films always struggle from is eventually you're like, look, put the camera down, run, use the camera as a weapon, whatever. But I think this film gets away with that a little bit more as the story develops. Alright, so that's me done. I'm going to say just go and watch it and let me know what you thought about it. Alright, like I say, don't believe what all the critics are saying. In my opinion, it's a much better film than it's being given credit for, and I think it's a film that will gain an audience as time goes on. Okay, now the spoiler section of the video. So if you haven't watched Apollo 18, definitely go away, watch it, come back and watch this video. Alright, so Apollo 18, the spoiler section. In the end, what I was talking about earlier on was the design of the creatures on the moon's surface. I did not, find them a really compelling villain, so to speak. I didn't find it's not like Alien, where you're just absolutely intrigued. What is this thing? And I think if they'd got that aspect of the film right, it would have elevated the film to a whole other level. Yes, they didn't try to do Alien, which is good. They didn't try to do something that was too reminiscent of that. But I think if they'd tried to come up with something which stood on its own, it would have really have helped the film. That sort of rocks coming to life, that sort of thing. I just didn't find that scary. Didn't find that frightening at all. But I'll tell you what it did remind me of. Actually, it reminded me of Lost in Space a little bit, with the spider-like creatures in Lost in Space, the film. Again, an underrated film, in my opinion. But anyway, that's a big problem. You go there, you build this sort of isolated, creepy environment, and then what do? You present the audience with something which just isn't very scary, and in places they try to show you glimpses of it, and it's like, well, when you see a glimpse of it at some point in the film from one of the cameras earlier on, so you just get enough of a glimpse to go, there's something there, but you can't make out what it is. Now, in my mind, you need to tie into some sort of primal fear in that sort of environment. I think if you saw the silhouette of a figure standing out, isolated, on the plains, on in the moon, just standing out there on its own. You just seen the outline of it for a second on the video footage as he turned round. A humanoid figure. To me, that's much more frightening than these strange contorted things that where the art the creature design just wasn't that great. Also, the fact that obviously I think a lot of it was I think all of it was probably CG. Um, they did try to not show it that much. I did like the reveal at the end where they say, rocks were brought back from the moon and they were given to almost every major dignitary around the world in every country as gifts, which is true. I really like that idea. So that was almost like as if these things would maybe somehow take over because there's the inference that one of the crew members is being contaminated and that he's being taken over by these things. I think it was a little bit cliched in a way where they built up the astronauts about like their families and all that, but I really did feel for the final last astronaut when he's trying to escape and they're telling him, from Houston, they're saying, look, you've done a great service for your country and for the world, but you can't come back. You're it's too dangerous, And I thought that was really really sad, and that's when the film really established this oppressive feeling of you're stuck, you know, hundreds of thousands of miles away from Earth. That's a frightening thought, and just how lonely and desolate the moon looks. It obviously brought up ideas of, if you watch 2001, a film we're going to talk about at some point shortly. It's based on an Arthur C. Clarke story called The Sentinel, and there's aspects of that story which I felt very much were in this. I should have mentioned that in the pre-spoiler section, but I'm mentioning it here, where the characters are going across the lunar surface and they find these this artifact, this sort of construction, and it's like, what is this? Who built it? That sort of thing. I find stories like that really intriguing, and that was my biggest disappointment with Apollo 18. It didn't have that payoff with regards to what was actually there. But good performances. I thought very good performances. Good production design, good production values for the amount of money they spent on it. It's a decent film. Go check it out. Let me know what you thought about it. I'm going to move my cheat sheet here because I can't read it anyway. And join us in the forums. As all, you know you want to. It's better than sex.